The betrayal. The Galactic Empire was the most feared force in the galaxy. Their power was unmatched, their armies vast, and their technology advanced beyond imagination. They ruled with an iron fist, crushing any who dared to oppose them. But when humanity appeared on the galactic stage, they brought something different: hope. The humans, new to the wider galaxy, came with offers of peace and cooperation. They believed that by working together, they could achieve more than by fighting. The Empire, always calculating and cunning, saw an opportunity in humanity's naivety. A treaty was signed. The Emperor himself met with humanity's leaders, shaking hands and exchanging promises of mutual respect. The humans were cautious but hopeful. They didn't trust the Empire completely, but they wanted to believe that peace was possible. After all, humanity had faced many challenges in their history, and they had always found a way to survive and thrive. This time, they hoped it would be the same. But the Empire had other plans. Behind closed doors, the Emperor and his advisors plotted against the humans. They saw humanity as weak, their desire for peace as a sign of softness. The Empire wanted the rich resources of Earth and the human colonies, and they were willing to take them by force. But they knew that a direct attack would be too risky. Humanity was small but not without strength, and an open war could rally other races against the Empire. So they decided on a different approach: a betrayal from within. The Empire secretly sent their spies into human territory, disguised as diplomats and traders. These spies gathered information on human defenses, their military strength, and their resources. They spread lies and sowed discord among the human leaders, trying to create division and mistrust. At the same time, the Empire's military began covert operations against human colonies. On a remote mining colony, far from Earth, the first attack came without warning. Empire forces descended on the colony, destroying communication lines and cutting off any chance of escape. The miners, ordinary men and women who had come to this distant world in search of a better life, were slaughtered. The Empire's soldiers showed no mercy, killing anyone who resisted and taking the colony's valuable minerals for themselves. The few survivors who managed to escape told stories of the brutal attack, but the Empire denied any involvement. They blamed pirates or rogue factions, and the human leaders, unsure of who to trust, hesitated to retaliate. But the attacks didn't stop. One by one, other human colonies came under assault. Small outposts were wiped out, their people massacred or taken as slaves. Cargo ships were ambushed and stolen, leaving vital supply lines broken. Each time, the Empire's involvement was carefully hidden, making it seem like random acts of violence in a chaotic galaxy. Humanity's leaders grew more and more suspicious, but they lacked the proof needed to accuse the Empire openly. Meanwhile, on Earth, the human government was in turmoil. Reports of the attacks were coming in from all sides, and no one knew what to believe. Some leaders argued for immediate action, demanding that they confront the Empire directly. Others urged caution, fearing that a war with the Empire would be disastrous. Amidst the confusion, one thing was clear: humanity was being hunted, and they didn't know by whom. But there were those among the humans who saw the truth. Admiral Marcus Kane, a seasoned military leader, was one of them. He had fought in many battles and had seen the Empire's tactics before. He recognized the pattern in the attacks, the way they were coordinated yet concealed. He knew that the Empire was behind it, even if he couldn't prove it. But he also knew that they couldn't wait for proof. The longer they hesitated, the more vulnerable they became. Admiral Kane gathered a group of trusted officers and allies. They met in secret, away from the prying eyes of the Empire's spies. "We are being betrayed," Kane said, his voice grim. "The Empire is trying to weaken us from within, to make us doubt ourselves and each other. But we cannot allow that to happen. We must prepare for what's coming." The others listened, their faces hardening as the truth sank in. They knew that if Kane was right, they were on the brink of a war they might not win. But they also knew that if they didn't act, humanity could be wiped out before they even had a chance to fight back. Together, they began to plan their response, preparing for the day when they would strike back against the Empire. As the days passed, the tension among humanity grew. The attacks continued, and the Empire's grip tightened. But now, humanity was no longer blind to the threat. They were gathering their strength, sharpening their weapons, and preparing for the inevitable showdown. The Empire had made a grave mistake. They had underestimated humanity's will to survive. In the shadows, Admiral Kane and his allies worked tirelessly, building secret alliances and strengthening their defenses. They knew the Empire was powerful, but they also knew that humanity had faced impossible odds before and had come out stronger. They would not be broken by betrayal. Instead, they would rise, and when the time came, they would make the Empire pay for their treachery. The Galactic Empire thought they could crush humanity with lies and deception, but they had only succeeded in awakening a force they could not control. The betrayal was just the beginning. And soon, the galaxy would learn what happens when you push humanity too far. The plan for revenge. The betrayal was fresh in their minds. Humanity had been caught off guard, but now they knew the truth. The Galactic Empire, the very force that had pretended to be their ally, was behind the brutal attacks on their colonies. It was a revelation that shook the human leadership to its core, but it also ignited a fire of determination. They would not stand by and let their people be slaughtered. It was time for revenge. Admiral Marcus Kane was at the center of this plan. He had seen enough of the Empire's cruelty to know that there would be no peace. The Empire understood only one language: power. And Kane was determined to speak that language fluently. He gathered his most trusted officers in a secure underground bunker on Earth. The walls were lined with holographic screens, each displaying critical data on the Empire's military, trade routes, and vulnerable outposts. Kane's voice was steady, but the anger behind it was clear. The Empire thinks they can crush us with their lies and their hidden attacks. They believe we are weak, that we will cower in fear, but they are wrong. We will strike back, and we will make them regret the day they ever crossed humanity. The officers around the table nodded, their faces grim. They were all veterans, men and women who had seen combat and knew the price of war. But this war was different. This time, they were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for vengeance. Captain Area Hayes, one of the most skilled tacticians in the human fleet, leaned forward. We need to hit them where it hurts. The Empire's strength lies in its vastness, but that is also its weakness. They can't protect everything at once. If we strike the right targets, we can cripple their operations and force them to spread their forces thin. Kane nodded in agreement. Exactly. We need to be smart about this. The Empire is arrogant. They think their power makes them invincible, but they rely too much on fear and intimidation. If we can disrupt their supply lines and destroy key installations, we can throw them into disarray. The plan began to take shape. They would target the Empire's most critical resources: fuel depots, communication hubs, and military supply stations. These were the lifeblood of the Empire's war machine. Without them, the Empire's fleets would be stranded, their soldiers isolated, and their leadership scrambling to maintain control. But this plan required more than just strategy. It needed precision. The human fleet was strong, but it was still outnumbered by the Empire's forces. They couldn't afford to waste resources on battles they couldn't win. Instead, they would use hit-and-run tactics, striking quickly and disappearing before the Empire could respond. Admiral Kane knew they needed a special team for this mission: elite pilots and soldiers who could operate behind enemy lines with stealth and efficiency. He called upon the Phoenix Squadron, a group of the best and most daring fighters humanity had to offer. The Phoenix Squadron had a reputation for taking on impossible missions and coming out on top. They were exactly what Kane needed. Captain Area Hayes was chosen to lead the Phoenix Squadron. She was a born leader, with nerves of steel and a mind that could outthink any opponent. Under her command, The Phoenix Squadron would be the spearhead of humanity's revenge. "We'll strike first at the fuel depots on the Empire's outer rim," Area explained, pointing to a holographic map of the galaxy. "These depots are heavily guarded, but they're isolated. If we hit them hard and fast, we can destroy them before the Empire can react. Without fuel, their ships will be stuck, and their supply lines will start to crumble." The officers agreed with the plan. It was bold, risky, but exactly what they needed to send a message to the Empire. Humanity was not to be trifled with. Preparations began immediately. The Phoenix Squadron's ships were outfitted with the latest in stealth technology and armed to the teeth with high-powered missiles and plasma cannons. They trained relentlessly, running simulations of the attack over and over until every pilot knew their role perfectly. There was no room for error. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the rest of the human fleet was put on high alert. Admiral Kane knew that the Empire would retaliate once they realized what was happening, and they needed to be ready. Defenses were strengthened, and every available ship was prepared for battle. This wasn't just about the Phoenix Squadron's mission. This was about the survival of humanity itself. Finally, the day came. The Phoenix Squadron, led by Captain Area, launched from a hidden base on the dark side of the moon. Their ships, nearly invisible to the naked eye, slipped through space undetected, heading straight for the first target. The tension was palpable as they approached the fuel depot. The Empire's forces were there, as expected, but they were unprepared for what was coming. "Remember, speed is our ally." Area's voice crackled over the comms. In and out before they know what hit them. The attack was swift and devastating. The Phoenix Squadron struck with surgical precision, their weapons ripping through the depot's defenses like paper. Explosions lit up the cold darkness of space as the fuel reserves ignited, sending shockwaves through the Empire's fleet. Within minutes, it was over. The depot was destroyed, and the Phoenix Squadron was already on their way to the next target. Back on Earth, Admiral Kane watched the mission's progress with satisfaction. The first blow had been struck, but this was only the beginning. The Empire would feel the full force of humanity's wrath. For too long, they had underestimated the strength and resolve of humans. Now they would learn the hard way that when pushed to the brink, humanity was capable of unimaginable power. As the Phoenix Squadron continued their campaign, word spread across the galaxy. The Empire's enemies, long oppressed and beaten down, began to take heart. If humanity could stand up to the Empire, then maybe they could too. Rebellion stirred in the corners of the galaxy, and the Empire's grip began to weaken. But for humanity, this was not just about rebellion. This was about justice. This was about making the Empire pay for every drop of blood they had spilled. And as the fires of vengeance burned bright in their hearts, humanity prepared for the final devastating blow that would bring the Empire to its knees. The first attack. The time had come. After weeks of planning and preparation, humanity was ready to strike back. The Phoenix Squadron, under the command of Captain Area Hayes, had already dealt a significant blow to the Galactic Empire by destroying their fuel depot. But now, it was time for the first full-scale attack, a mission that would send a clear message to the Empire. Humanity would not be broken. Admiral Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of the human flagship, indomitable, watching as the fleet gathered in the cold void of space. The ships were a mix of old and new battle-worn vessels, alongside freshly constructed warships, all bristling with weapons. Every crew member knew the stakes. They were outnumbered, but they had something the Empire didn't: resolve. They had been betrayed, their people attacked without warning, and now they were ready to make the Empire pay. The target was a key military outpost on the edge of the Empire's territory. This outpost was not just a strategic location, it was a symbol of the Empire's dominance. It controlled several important trade routes and served as a launching point for many of the Empire's attacks on human colonies. Destroying it would cripple the Empire's ability to strike at humanity and would show the galaxy that the Empire was not invincible. Everyone knows their roles, Kane said, addressing the fleet through the comms. We've trained for this moment. Remember, we strike hard and fast. We don't give them time to react. Today, we send a message that will echo across the galaxy. On board her ship, Captain Aria Hayes prepared her squadron for the attack. The Phoenix Squadron had been instrumental in the initial strike against the fuel depot, and now they were ready to lead the charge again. Aria's eyes were focused, her mind running through the battle plan one last time. She knew the risks, but she also knew they had no choice. If humanity was to survive, they had to fight. Phoenix Squadron, form up, Aria commanded. We go in first, take out their defenses, and clear the way for the fleet. Stay sharp, stay together, and watch each other's backs. The Phoenix Squadron's sleek fighters moved into formation, their engines humming as they prepared to jump to the target. Aria's ship, Falcon 1, led the way. She glanced at the picture of her family that she kept taped to her console, a reminder of what she was fighting for. With a deep breath, she activated the jump drive, and in an instant, the stars stretched and blurred as they entered hyperspace. The jump was short, and when the Phoenix Squadron dropped out of hyperspace, they were right on top of the Empire's outpost. The station loomed ahead, its dark metal structure bristling with turrets and hangar bays. Imperial ships patrolled the area, but they were caught off guard by the sudden appearance of the human fighters. Engage, Aria ordered. The battle erupted in a flash of laser fire and missile trails. The Phoenix Squadron dove into the heart of the enemy formation, their weapons blazing. Aria's ship weaved through the chaos, her targeting systems locking onto one of the outpost's main defense turrets. She fired a barrage of missiles, and they streaked toward their target, slamming into the turret and engulfing it in flames. Behind her, the rest of the squadron followed suit, targeting the outpost's defenses with precision strikes. The Empire's ships scrambled to respond, but they were too slow. The Phoenix Squadron was too fast, too coordinated, and too determined. Within minutes, the outpost's outer defenses were in ruins, and the human fleet arrived to finish the job. The Indomitable emerged from hyperspace, its massive guns already firing. Explosions rippled across the outpost as the fleet unleashed a relentless barrage. The Empire's ships tried to mount a defense, but they were overwhelmed. Human frigates and destroyers swarmed them, picking off one after another with brutal efficiency. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Kane watched the battle unfold. So far, everything was going according to plan. The Empire was struggling to hold the line, and the outpost's defenses were crumbling. But Kane knew better than to get complacent. The Empire was dangerous, and they would fight to the last man. Focus fire on their command center, Kane ordered. We need to take that out before they can call for reinforcements. The fleet adjusted its aim, concentrating their fire on the heart of the outpost. The command center, a heavily fortified structure at the center of the station, became the primary target. It was the brain of the outpost, coordinating all defensive actions. If they could destroy it, the battle would be won. But the Empire wasn't going down without a fight. As the human fleet closed in, the outpost's remaining turrets fired back with everything they had. A powerful energy beam shot from the command center, slicing through one of the human destroyers. The ship exploded in a ball of fire, debris scattering into space. Stay focused, Kane urged. We're almost there. In the midst of the battle, Captain Aria Hayes led her squadron on a daring run straight at the command center. The Phoenix Squadron weaved through the flurry of enemy fire, their ships moving as one. Aria's heart pounded as she lined up her shot. The command center was right in her sights. Now, she shouted. The squadron unleashed their payloads simultaneously. Missiles and plasma blasts tore into the command center, breaking through its armor and igniting the volatile systems inside. The structure shuddered, and then, in a massive explosion, it erupted into a fiery inferno. The destruction of the command center sent shockwaves through the Imperial forces. With their command structure in ruins, the Empire's ships began to falter. The human fleet pressed their advantage, hammering the remaining defenses until they too were nothing but wreckage. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the battle was over. The Imperial outpost was destroyed, its once imposing structure now a smoldering ruin. The human fleet had won their first major victory against the Empire, and the galaxy would soon hear of it. Admiral Kane allowed himself a small smile as he surveyed the aftermath. The first attack had been a success, but this was only the beginning. The Empire had awakened a force they could not hope to control. Humanity was coming for them, and they would not stop until justice was served. Captain Aria Hayes, her ship battered but still flying, took a deep breath as she looked at the burning remains of the outpost. This was for all the lives the Empire had taken, and it was just the start. The road ahead was long and dangerous, but humanity had taken the first step, and they would not turn back. The Empire strikes back. The news of the outpost's destruction spread like wildfire across the galaxy. For the first time in history, the Galactic Empire had been dealt a significant blow by a species they had underestimated, humans. The Empire's leaders were furious, their pride wounded, and their control over the galaxy threatened. It was time to remind humanity of their place. On the capital planet of the Empire, Emperor Valder sat in his grand throne room, seething with rage. His advisors and generals stood around him, fear evident in their eyes. They had all witnessed the destruction of the outpost and the loss of many Imperial soldiers. But Valder's fury was not just about the loss. It was about the audacity of humanity to strike at the heart of the Empire. How could this happen? Valdar demanded, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. We are the most powerful force in the galaxy, and yet these humans dare to challenge us. His top general, Korvac, stepped forward, bowing his head. Your Excellency, we underestimated their resolve. They are more resourceful and determined than we anticipated. But we will not let this stand. We have already begun preparations for a counterattack. Valdar's eyes narrowed as he leaned forward on his throne. Tell me, General Korvac, what is your plan? Korvac straightened up, his voice firm. We will strike back with overwhelming force. Our fleets are being mobilized as we speak. We will target one of their major colonies, New Terra. It is a hub of their military operations and one of their most heavily populated planets. Destroying it will cripple their ability to continue the fight and break their morale. The Emperor considered this for a moment, his anger slowly turning into a cold, calculated resolve. Make it so. Show these humans what happens when they defy the Empire. Leave nothing standing. Korvac nodded and left the throne room, immediately contacting the fleet commanders. The Empire's armada, a vast and terrifying force, was assembled in orbit above the capital planet. Thousands of ships, ranging from nimble fighters to massive dreadnoughts, formed an impenetrable wall of destruction. The order was given, and the fleet began its journey to New Terra. On New Terra, the mood was one of celebration. The successful attack on the Empire's outpost had boosted morale, and for a moment, humanity dared to hope. But this hope was short-lived. Alarms blared across the planet as sensors detected the approach of the Imperial fleet. The skies darkened as the massive ships broke through the atmosphere, casting ominous shadows over the cities below. In the planet's capital, General Evelyn Drake, the commander of New Terra's defenses, quickly mobilized her forces. She knew this day would come. The Empire would not sit idly by after the loss of their outpost, but she had hoped for more time to prepare. Now, they had to fight with everything they had. All defense stations, this is not a drill. General Drake's voice boomed over the comms. The Empire is here, and they're not holding back. We must defend this planet at all costs. Prepare for battle. The planet's defense systems, a network of powerful orbital cannons and shield generators, activated. Ships scrambled to meet the incoming fleet, but the difference in numbers was staggering. The Imperial fleet dwarfed the human defenders, and their firepower was overwhelming. The first wave of attacks hit hard. The Empire's ships unleashed a relentless barrage of laser fire and missiles, New Terra's orbital defenses responded in kind, their cannons lighting up the sky as they tried to hold the line. Explosions filled the air as ships from both sides were destroyed, debris raining down on the planet's surface. But the Empire's numbers were too great. Despite the bravery of the human defenders, the Imperial fleet began to break through. One by one, the orbital cannons fell silent, their power sources destroyed or their control centers obliterated. The planet's shield generators, strained by the constant bombardment, started to falter. In the midst of the chaos, General Drake remained calm, directing the defense with precision. "Redirect power to the remaining shields," she ordered. "We need to buy more time for the civilians to evacuate." But deep down, she knew the situation was dire. The Empire had come prepared, and they were not holding back. The ground forces were already engaging Imperial troops that had landed in key locations, but they were outmatched in both technology and numbers. As the battle raged on, the Imperial flagship, Imperator, descended into the atmosphere, its massive bulk casting a shadow over the capital city. From the bridge, General Korvac watched the destruction unfold. He had been given a clear directive: annihilate New Terra and make an example of humanity. "Begin the final assault," Korvac commanded. "Target their capital city. Burn it to the ground." The Imperator's main cannons charged up, their tips glowing with a menacing red light. A moment later, beams of energy shot out, striking the heart of the capital. Buildings crumbled, and the ground shook as the city was torn apart by the relentless attack. The devastation was complete, and within minutes, the once thriving city was reduced to ashes. On the ground, General Drake watched in horror as her city was destroyed. The evacuation was only partially complete, and many civilians had not made it out. Her heart ached for her people, but she knew the battle was lost. "Fall back," she ordered, her voice breaking. "All units, fall back to the secondary defense lines." As the surviving forces retreated, the Empire's fleet continued its assault, methodically destroying any remaining resistance. The skies above New Terra were filled with fire and smoke, the light of burning cities reflecting off the clouds. The Empire had struck back with a vengeance, and the cost to humanity was devastating. But even in the face of such overwhelming power, there was still a flicker of defiance. The fight was far from over. Humanity had been knocked down, but they were not defeated. And as the fires of New Terra burned, the surviving human forces regrouped, their resolve hardened by the loss. They had been warned, and now they had felt the full might of the Empire. But the Empire would soon learn that humanity would never bow, and their final warning was only the beginning: the path to war. The ruins of New Terra still smoldered as the survivors regrouped in hidden bunkers deep beneath the planet's surface. The air was thick with ash, and the once thriving cities were now charred wastelands. But in the hearts of the survivors, the fire of defiance burned brighter than ever. General Evelyn Drake stood in the war room, surrounded by her remaining officers. The loss was staggering, but she knew they couldn't afford to dwell on it. The Empire's attack had changed everything. Humanity was no longer just defending its territory. They were now on the path to full-scale war. Drake looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each officer. They were bruised, battered, and weary, but their determination was unmistakable. They had lost New Terra, but they hadn't lost the will to fight. "We can't stay here," Drake began, her voice steady. "The Empire thinks they've broken us, but they're wrong. We need to regroup, gather our forces, and strike back. This isn't the end. It's just the beginning." One of her officers, Captain Rayner, spoke up. "But General, our forces are scattered, and our resources are limited. How can we possibly take on the Empire with what we have left?" Drake nodded, acknowledging the harsh reality. "You're right, Captain. We're outnumbered and outgunned. But we still have something the Empire doesn't: our resolve. They may have the numbers, but we have the advantage of knowing the terrain and the will to fight for our survival. We'll use guerrilla tactics, hit and run attacks. We'll make them regret ever thinking they could crush us. Another officer, Lieutenant Vega, stepped forward. We need allies. There are other species in the galaxy who fear the Empire's growing power. If we can convince them to join us, we might stand a chance. Drake considered this, realizing that Vega was right. Humanity couldn't win this war alone. They needed to find others who were willing to fight back against the Empire's tyranny. Agreed, Drake said. Our first priority is to contact the other species, especially those who have suffered under the Empire's rule. We'll form alliances, build a coalition, but we can't wait for them to come to us. We need to be proactive. She turned to the holographic map of the galaxy that flickered on the table before them. Red dots marked the locations of Imperial outposts and fleets, while blue dots represented the scattered remnants of human forces. We'll start by disrupting their supply lines, Drake continued, pointing to several key locations on the map. If we can cut off their resources, we can weaken them from within. We'll hit them where they least expect it. And in the meantime, we'll build up our strength, gather allies, and prepare for the inevitable confrontation. The officers nodded in agreement, their spirits lifted by the plan. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was a plan, a path forward. They had lost New Terra, but they hadn't lost the war. This was just the beginning of their fight for survival. As the meeting concluded, the officers dispersed to carry out their assignments. Captain Raynor and Lieutenant Vega were tasked with reaching out to potential allies, while others focused on coordinating the remaining human forces for the upcoming strikes against the Empire's supply lines. Drake remained in the war room, staring at the map. She knew the road ahead would be long and fraught with danger, but she also knew that humanity couldn't afford to lose. The Empire had made the first move, but now it was humanity's turn. Hours later, as the last of the officers left the room, Drake was approached by an old friend, Commander Hayes, who had fought alongside her in many battles. His face was lined with worry, but there was a spark of hope in his eyes. "Evelyn," Hayes said, using her first name, something he only did in private, "do you really think we can win this?" Drake looked at him, her expression hardening with resolve. "We don't have a choice, Hayes. The Empire has made it clear. They won't stop until we're all dead or enslaved. We have to fight, and we have to win. For the fallen, for the survivors, and for the future of humanity." Hayes nodded, his confidence bolstered by her words. "Then let's make them pay. Let's make them regret ever underestimating us." Drake placed a hand on his shoulder, a rare gesture of camaraderie. "We will, Hayes. We will." With that, she turned back to the map, already planning their next move. The path to war was set, and there was no turning back. Humanity had been pushed to the brink, but in doing so, the Empire had unleashed a force it could never have anticipated. The fight was far from over, and now, with renewed determination, humanity would rise from the ashes of New Terra. The galaxy would soon learn that when you push humans to the edge, they come back stronger, fiercer, and more relentless than ever. The path to war was clear, and humanity was ready to walk it, no matter the cost. The final warning. The cold, silent void of space was disturbed by the arrival of the massive human fleet. Thousands of ships, each bristling with weaponry, emerged from hyperspace, forming an impenetrable wall of metal and firepower. At the center of the formation was the Indomitable, the largest and most powerful warship ever constructed by humanity. Its presence alone was a message, a final warning to the Galactic Empire. On the bridge of the Indomitable, General Evelyn Drake stood tall, her gaze fixed on the viewscreen displaying the Empire's homeworld, Vorfal Prime. The planet gleamed like a jewel against the backdrop of stars, its cities and defenses clearly visible. But Drake wasn't here to admire the view. She was here to deliver humanity's last ultimatum. "Open a channel to the Empire's high command," Drake ordered, her voice steady and firm. The communications officer quickly complied, and moments later, the holographic image of Supreme Commander Zalgor, the Empire's military leader, appeared before them. His reptilian features twisted into a sneer as he observed the human fleet. "You dare to bring your pitiful fleet to our homeworld? Salgoriist, do you truly believe you can threaten the might of the Galactic Empire?" Drake didn't flinch. She had expected this arrogance. It was what had led the Empire to underestimate humanity in the first place. But now, they would see the error of their ways. "We're not here to threaten you, Zalagor," Drake replied calmly. "We're here to give you one last chance. Withdraw your forces from human space, end your occupation of our worlds, and agree to a ceasefire. If you refuse, we will unleash the full fury of our fleet upon you. This is your final warning." Zalagor laughed, a harsh, grating sound that echoed across the bridge. "You overestimate your strength, human. Your fleet may be impressive, but it is nothing compared to the full power of the Empire. We will crush you just as we crushed New Terra." Drake's eyes narrowed. "You think New Terra was our defeat. It was your mistake, Zalagor. You've united humanity against you, and now we stand ready to destroy you if you don't heed this warning." The Supreme Commander's expression darkened, his eyes narrowing with contempt. "You speak of destruction as if you have the means, but we both know that if you attack, it will be the end of your species." Drake held his gaze, her voice turning cold as steel. "If we fall, we will make sure you fall with us." There was a moment of silence, the tension between them palpable. Then, with a dismissive wave, Zalagor cut the transmission. The hologram flickered and disappeared, leaving the bridge in silence. Drake turned to her officers, their faces tense with anticipation. "Prepare all weapon systems. We gave them a chance. If they choose war, we will answer." The crew moved swiftly, the ship humming with the sound of energy weapons powering up. Drake knew the Empire would not surrender easily. They were too arrogant, too confident in their superiority. But that confidence would be their downfall. Suddenly, the tactical officer spoke up. "General, we're detecting multiple energy signatures. The Empire's fleet is mobilizing. Several battle groups are headed straight for us." Drake nodded. "All ships, prepare for battle. Hold the line. If they attack, we fight back with everything we've got." The human fleet tightened its formation, ready to meet the Empire's forces head-on. The calm before the storm hung in the air. Every soldier, every pilot, every officer knowing that the next few minutes would determine the fate of their species. As the Empire's fleet approached, Drake activated the ship-wide intercom. Her voice rang out across the Indomitable and to every ship in the fleet. "This is General Drake. We are the last line of defense for humanity. The Empire believes they can break us, but they don't understand who we are. We will fight with everything we have, and if this is to be our last stand, we will make it a stand they will never forget. Hold your positions and remember, this is our final warning to them. Let's make sure they never forget it." The crew responded with a chorus of determination. The resolve in their voices was clear. They were ready to fight, ready to lay down their lives if it meant protecting their home. Drake turned her attention back to the view screen as the first of the Empire's ships came into range. The battle was about to begin. But this was more than just a battle. It was a statement, a declaration that humanity would not be broken. The Empire's ships opened fire, and the void lit up with the glow of energy blasts. The human fleet responded in kind, unleashing a torrent of firepower that tore through the enemy ranks. The final warning had been given. Now, the fate of the galaxy would be decided by the clash of these two titanic forces. Drake watched as the battle unfolded, her heart pounding with the weight of responsibility. This was it, the moment of truth. For humanity, for New Terra, for every life lost in this war, they would fight until the very end. And if this was to be the final stand, they would make sure it was one that echoed through the stars for all eternity. The fall of the Empire. The battle raged across the void of space, a clash of titans that illuminated the darkness with blinding flashes of energy. The human fleet, led by the Indomitable, fought fiercely against the might of the Galactic Empire. Every ship, every weapon, Every soldier was pushing to the limit. The fate of their species hung in the balance. General Evelyn Drake stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, her gaze fixed on the chaotic scene outside. The once proud Empire fleet was now a broken force, its ships scattered and battered. The human forces, though outnumbered, fought with a relentless determination that was proving to be the Empire's undoing. Status report. Drake barked, her voice cutting through the din of the battle. The tactical officer quickly responded. General, the Empire's fleet is in disarray. Their flagship, the Conqueror, is heavily damaged and attempting to retreat. We're inflicting severe losses on their remaining ships. Drake's eyes narrowed. The Conqueror was the symbol of the Empire's power, and if it fell, the Empire would be dealt a devastating blow. Order all ships to focus fire on the Conqueror. We need to finish this. As the command was relayed, the human fleet concentrated its firepower on the Imperial flagship. The Conqueror was a colossal ship, but it was no match for the coordinated assault from the united human fleet. Plasma blasts and energy bolts pummeled its defenses, and the once imposing vessel began to falter. On the bridge of the Conqueror, Supreme Commander Zalgor roared in frustration. His fleet was crumbling around him, and the sight of his flagship being overwhelmed was a blow to his pride. He slammed his fist on the console. Return fire. Engage the Indomitable with everything we've got. We can't lose here. The remaining Imperial ships redirected their fire, aiming at the Indomitable, but the human ship's defenses were holding firm. The crew of the Indomitable fought back with fierce determination, their counterattacks devastating the Imperial forces. As the Conqueror's hull began to crack and groan under the relentless assault, Salgor knew the end was near. He made a desperate decision. Prepare the self-destruct sequence. If we cannot win, we will not let them claim our ship. The order was carried out, and the countdown began. The Conqueror was set to explode, taking out as many of the enemy ships as possible in its final moments. But the explosion would come too late to turn the tide of the battle. Drake watched the situation unfold from the bridge of the Indomitable. She saw the desperate measure taken by Xalagor and understood the risk. Prepare to disengage. Get our ships clear of the Conqueror's blast radius. The crew scrambled to execute the orders. The human fleet pulled back, maintaining their positions but ensuring they were out of range of the impending explosion. As the countdown reached its final moments, Zalgor's ship erupted in a brilliant cataclysmic explosion that illuminated the dark void. The shockwave from the explosion rippled through space, but the human fleet had successfully evaded the worst of it. The remaining Imperial ships were now in full retreat, their morale shattered by the loss of their flagship and the overwhelming force of the human assault. Drake watched as the last of the Empire's fleet vanished into hyperspace. The battle was won, but the cost had been high. The void was filled with the debris of countless ships, and the silence that followed was a stark contrast to the chaos of the battle. The crew of the Indomitable began to assess the damage and tend to the wounded. Despite their victory, there was no sense of triumph. The war had taken a toll on everyone, and the losses were deeply felt. Drake took a moment to reflect on the enormity of the victory. The fall of the Empire was a monumental event, one that would reshape the galaxy. Humanity had faced the greatest threat imaginable and had emerged victorious. But the victory came with a heavy price. As she walked through the corridors of the Indomitable, Drake was greeted by her officers and crew, their faces marked with exhaustion and relief. They had fought bravely and had turned the tide of the war. The galaxy would remember this day as the turning point, the moment when humanity stood against the Empire and emerged triumphant. In the days that followed, the human fleet began the process of rebuilding and reorganizing. The fall of the Empire opened the way for a new era of peace and cooperation. The scars of war would remain, but they were now joined by the hope of a brighter future. Drake stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, gazing out at the stars. The galaxy was forever changed, and humanity had earned its place in it. The fall of the Empire was not just a victory for the human race, but a testament to their resilience, courage, and unbreakable spirit. The war was over, but the journey ahead was just beginning. Humanity had proven that they were a force to be reckoned with, and their story would echo across the stars for generations to come.